My subject tonight, then, ladies and gentlemen, the language of symbols, which becomes a language of communication for disciples with their higher selves, with the Master. What is a symbol? Carl Jung's definition is probably the best one. Any word or image is symbolic or becomes a symbol when it implies something more than is obvious or its immediate meaning. Say it again. Any word or image is symbolic or becomes a symbol when it implies something more than its obvious or immediate meaning. We all of us know the symbol on the front of the program, the phoenix. And even when we looked at it straight away, we said to ourselves, well, if this is a festival of esoteric science, that thing on the cover must have some symbolic meaning. And when I've got time, I'll go into it. And indeed, the phoenix has a symbolic meaning. I'm not going to deal with it tonight. But there was more than that. There were the colors of the phoenix. There was a reason for putting it there at all, implying also that this was the name of the city in which the festival was held, and so on. And so, this is what we mean by a symbol. Although we see something or hear a word, we know that it implies something more than exactly what we read or what we are looking at. For instance, the sign Alpha has many meanings. But for me, it always represents Alpha, the beginning. The first letter of the Greek alphabet, the beginning. Taken upright, it is a form of Aries which rules the beginning, the opening door, beginning of a new cycle. Now let us take some examples of words. The first line of Gerard Manley Hopkins' work, The Windover. The man is standing on the top of a cliff. Great white cliffs of Dover. He's standing on the top of the cliff and is looking out over the channel. Cliffs of Dover. And it's dawn. It's dawn, and he looks out over the cliff. I caught this morning's minion, Kingdom of Daylight's dolphin. The poem is called The Windover. It's a poem about a falcon, so we know straight away that he's describing a bird. I caught this morning's minion, a minion. The sun, a favorite of the morning. And so straight away, we begin to get the feeling of this. Here is the morning, the dawn is beginning to be set in motion, and straight away we're thinking of a minion, something that the dawn loves, which enhances the dawn. Kingdom of Daylight, here's the Kingdom of Daylight, and it's a glittering pageant, the dawn. Kingdom of Daylight, dolphin. Dolphin straight away takes us to France. Le Dauphin, the head prince of France, the king's eldest son. Le Roi, the king's eldest son. So straight away we get a feeling of the French court and all the pomp of the court. Kingdom of Daylight's Dauphin. So shall we put him in? There he is, the bird flying. The falcon flying towards the dawn. And so we'll put in the line in which he says, dappled. And dappled means that the light of the dawn is sparkling on his wings wherever the wings flash in the light, dapple, dawn, drawn towards the dawn, dapple, drawn falcon. So now the words become meaningful. Already things are beginning to be revealed. But we've already been given a clue to the French court. And straight away the symbol that we see there of the dappled, dawn-drawn falcon, the symbol becomes more meaningful as the fleur-de-lis. Now that's what we mean by good poetry and symbolism. The use of one or two words to suppress and express many. Very quickly, in the class, who saw that symbol today? Where? The coffee bar. The sugar sachets have got the fleur-de-lis on them. You're a miserable lot. You must understand that just as a person begins to learn a new language in a new country, and the only way to learn it is to speak it and saturate yourself in it, this is what we mean by total committal. Saturate yourself in symbols. And as fast as you do it, the symbols begin to overlap, everything becomes meaningful. Yes, the fleur-de-lis. The English version of it. The English version of it. The French, of course, came to Britain 1066, and out of their visit to Britain, there arose this symbol of Le Dauphin of Britain, the Prince of Wales' symbol, the three feathers, rather than the fleur-de-lis, the lily of France, the three feathers. And the three feathers has its motto, Ich dien. Ich dien, I serve. Is it a meaningful occult symbol? Yes, of course it is. It is related to the throat chakra and the altar major center. Now this is how you have got to begin to operate in order to contact the higher worlds. You have to ultimately use symbols. There is no other way. You cannot enter and function in a realm without having a language, and even if the masters wanted you there, they would not want you to come into that realm ignorant, unable to converse. And so it's just a matter of having to do it, of having to use symbols. And so we can begin to understand then, by definition, Jung's definition, that a symbol has a wider meaning. It has an unconscious. And everything that you didn't see there, but which is expressed ultimately through delving, is part of the symbol's unconscious. And so the picture of the phoenix on the front of the program, the picture of the phoenix has a unconscious, part of the collective unconscious of a particular kind or grouping or archetypal pattern of symbols. The grouping or archetypal pattern of symbols is three bunched together. Or, if you like, it's the archetypal pattern of a feather. The archetypal pattern of a feather, whatever that means. Remembering, of course, that the bird in esoteric symbology is always indicative of a man who can fly, a person who can fly, a person who is spiritual. Birds in the symbolic language of the esoteric are indicative of people with potential to fly, people who can, if they are given the opportunity, have spiritual wings, as it were. And so this was a very, very important set of symbols contained in Manly Hopkins's work. And so we begin to get an impression that a symbol is veiling its unconscious. Tremendous amount of meaning is there which isn't exactly seen, obviously, in the symbol. And this relates beautifully to the current advanced attitudes, the psychological attitudes towards symbology. And so we begin to feel things about a symbol. A symbol has a meaning that can't be put into words exactly, can't be put into words exactly, even defined or explained. In fact, if we use a word, and we take one there, let's take a typical word there. Dauphin. The dauphin. We're talking about a bird, and now we're referring to him as a dauphin. The son of the dawn. The son of the dawn. And isn't the dawn the symbol of spiritual enlightenment? The dawning of consciousness. And so just the word dauphin expresses many things to us. It gave us the whole feeling of the thing. Now, poetry is the use of one word to express many. To express many words, many thoughts, many ideas. That's the glory of poetry. It's an intermediary stage towards learning the language of symbols per se. We can speak, but when we understand poetry, and for instance, that one word expresses many or suppresses many. Some poetry, the words are suppressing. They are tense with meaning, waiting for you just to touch them with your mind, and immediately they explode into a shower of meaning. A symbol has a meaning that may not even be rational. You may say, listen to him. He's got all sorts of fancy ideas. That's perfectly right. What symbols mean to me may be quite irrational to you. And therefore it's a very, very difficult subject to teach. Therefore we say we must have a criterion. We must have a gauge stick. And the importance of my talking on symbols here tonight is this, that I am giving a symbol, some of the symbols, which represent the language of communication in the Anglo-Saxon subrace. That's why I bother at all. Because we need, and you have got some, and I want to dig them out of you. And after tonight or this week, I want you to send me some in England, not half-baked, but some that you have dug out for yourselves and have traced right up to their archetypal origin. That's why I'm going to give you some examples. As Jung said, we brood over a wheel. Brood, ponder, and even in meditation, clear the mind away, and in that screen that lies between thoughts, in the screen that lies between thoughts, we posit a symbol. All right? Let's put a wheel there. Straight away, as Jung says, there comes the concept of a chakra, if we are esoteric. A chakra, an inner sun, the greater sun, the sun itself, a galaxy, the divine, the eternal. And this is how we communicate. Seeing into things. The other day, I gave you the symbol of the parachute. The parachute that lets you down, or the parachute that takes you up, as it can do in a breeze, and so on. This is why all religions employ symbols. The symbol bridges the gap between the explainable and the inexplicable. Nobody knows God exactly. We have saints to tell us their impressions of the divinity, or of the Logos, or whatever we choose to call him. But they don't even know. And so somewhere or the other our words, which are confined to describing length, breadth, and height, are no good. And so don't ask for the divine to be described to you always in words, for you are confining the divine. The divine is immeasurable. And how will we measure it? By symbols, the only way we know. And if you won't bother to put together some symbols in your background, you will not know the divine. You will not. And so throughout history, these symbols have been used wherever possible. The stained glass windows of the church or sacred places, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the embedded giant heads on Easter Island, the Bamian statues, immense and reshaped Buddhas depicting the size of man as he was on earth in the earliest days, the ceiling of the zodiac, the great Egyptian temple at Dendara, where our festival after next will be in Egypt, the cup and the bread in Holy Communion. The symbology behind all these things is immense. And that all of them are an attempt to take you a little stage further towards understanding the divine. So we understand. All these that I have given you examples of are symbols of something deeper and richer, which are only modified, lessened, when we try to describe them in words, when we try to rationalize them. Don't ask continuously to have somebody rationalize things for you. If you do that, you're only asking them to bend words. It's much, much more important for you to struggle for your own concept of a symbol. Would you expect anything else or less than symbols at first to understand your higher self? There is no other way of conveying to you the majesty of your higher self and the kingdom in which it lives. No one is exempt from having to learn the language of the next kingdom if that's his destiny, and it is his destiny. Learning about symbols is something that we have practiced throughout all our many lives on earth. Firstly, it was in savage bodies that we gathered around the totem pole, and their symbols were important. Thunder and lightning were given the names of gods. Some of us, with our Saxon origins, remember Thor and Thor's hammer, lightning and thunder, Thor's hammer. In those days, the winds were linked to the compass point, and we talked about the north wind and the south wind, and each of them were a personification of that wind. The cruel, cold north wind. And the lower symbol of it, Jack Frost. Jack Frost. Do you have Jack Frost over here? Jack Frost. But when the winds were light and delicate and warm and caressing, we gave them different symbols, different names, different concepts. Names like Zephyr. And Milton wrote about them. Or whether, as some sages sing, the frolic wind that breathes the spring, Zephyr with Aurora playing as he met her once a-Maying, and there on a bed of violets blue and fresh-blown roses washed in dew, filled her with thee, a daughter fair, so buxom, blithe, and debonair. Poetry, describing intercourse between the wind and the dawn. May I read it again? Or whether, as some sages sing, the frolic wind that breathes the spring, Zephyr with Aurora playing, as he met her once a-Maying, there on a bed of violets blue and fresh-blown roses washed in dew, filled her with thee, a daughter fair, so buxom, blithe, and debonair. I remember the words so well from school. The headmaster used to rush us over those lines in L'Allegro. And of course, poetry is an introductory course to symbolism. It's an easy step to the language of symbolism, as I have shown you. As I said earlier, poetry is the use of one word to express or to suppress many. Words can express almost any divine quality, or hellish quality for that matter, if they are chosen and arranged appropriately. If they are arranged in terms of rhyming and of meter, we can get almost anything out of words. Nothing better than Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, the epic story of man, the epic story of man. This is why we're doing some of the poetry sessions here at the festival. No wonder most of the masters at some time or the other in their many lives were ranked amongst the poets. Every master has been a poet at some time or the other. The Tibetan was once the poet Arya Sangha. All men, sometimes in their lives, have been poets, even if you and I were only once a wandering minstrel. But that is a very, very necessary training. Never sneer at the poets. Some maxims for you, some occult maxims. Being poetic drives us to God. Being poetic drives us towards God. Learn that. Being godly, leading the meditative way of life as being godly, drives us towards poetry and art. Leading the meditative life, the meditative way of life, is being godly, and that you will find will drive you towards art. Thirst for art, you will. They are reciprocal together. The one evokes the other, because they have a common substratum. What is the substratum under these? Truth, beauty, and goodness, struggling to manifest itself to us. Not only does truth, beauty, and goodness stare at us out of a beautiful scene, a work of art, a sculpture, but we ourselves are struggling towards it. And there's a tremendous impact in discipleship. Heavens, I had 10 years at 3 different universities, but none of those universities ever provided me with the expansion of consciousness and awareness that the esoteric did. None of them. For me, the esoteric was an explosion of awareness. The art that I learnt at university, the poetry, was meaningless to me until I understood the esoteric and began to look into it again. Some of the greatest poetry, of course, is of Hindu origin. And Hinduism itself is a wonderful religion, very pantheistic. Walt Disney is pantheistic, in a sense. Animals speaking, houses talking. The Hindus saw life in everything. More than that, they saw God in everything. There was a God, a single God for anything that existed, just about. If there's any sort of mystery surrounding a thing, the Hindus set up a God to it. You can be quite sure that they'll soon set up a God to the atom. The exploding atom. The mystery of the atom. A mystery? Let's have a God for it. They're a great people. We laugh at them because they've got 5,000 gods. We would be exceptionally gifted as aspirants on the path if any of us had 5,000 symbols in our vocabulary. We would be very articulate to the gods if we had those 5,000 symbols. Count up on your fingers sometime if you want to be ashamed. How many symbols have you with which to communicate with the gods? Not words. The young man almost shouted at his master, "Tell me, without words, how I can become perfect." The master answered quietly, Ask me without words, and I will tell you. Some say that Catholicism went too far in its creation of symbols or idols. It did. But only for the masses it went too far. They became hopelessly lost in these symbols, with emphasis placed on their form aspect. But that was not the totality of the Catholic Church. For some, for the Jesuits, who could go all the way, Catholicism, with all its ritual, its pomp, its pageantry, was the quickest way. The seventh way, the way of ceremonial order and ritual, it was the way to his feet that was for most of them. The masses couldn't keep up. They were all devotional. There was no ceremonial order and ritual there. It was just pure sixth-ray devotion. The Reformation sought a way around the symbols. Surely this isn't the only way through symbols. A bypass. Let's find a bypass. And all the Protestants did was to shed one set of symbols for another. What they were doing, in fact, was to stimulate not the solar plexus chakra, which is what is stimulated with Catholicism, the Catholicism part of Christianity. The Protestants began to stimulate with a new set of symbols the throat center. What were their symbols? The symbols of the Puritans, the Pilgrims. They tried to express outwardly in practical forms hard work, good husbandry. They believed the world could be transformed by hard tasks, literally taking the material world and reshaping it. It was just using another set of symbols. The problem with the church today, especially the Protestant church, is that it's concerned with the collective unconscious of the symbol. And by that I mean the lower unconscious. There are two aspects of the collective unconscious. There is the collective unconscious per se, and there is the collective superconscious. And the churches have become bogged down on the collective unconscious. By that I mean the sort of thing that is the guilt complex, the self-blame, the puritanical attitude towards evil. What the church should be searching for and giving to us is symbols depicting the collective superconscious. True art has many godlike qualities. By definition, it must be good for all time. A work of art must be good for all time. It must be eternally attractive, and this is true of symbols. They are eternally attractive, no matter what age. We are still concerned with the symbols of ancient Greece, and before that of Egypt, before that of the Babylonians, and so on and so on. Art is art for all ages. A Grecian urn fashioned 3,000 years ago is still likely to produce an effusion in a poet today, as we well know, ode to a Grecian urn. And so, symbols, like art, have a sense of the eternity about them. All real art is a learning ground for intercourse with the gods. I'm making a strong plea here to you for the mundane. I was in Fort Worth. Hell, of all the cities in this country, Fort Worth. And there I saw, I think it was $50 million worth of surrealist art. I'm sorry, expressionist art. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful it was. In one little city. The place was empty. It was empty. Must have cost a lot of money to bring it there, but it was empty. Art is a good preliminary, a good learning ground for the divine. Stimulates divine qualities in us. Stimulates the search for synthesis. Any work of art is a synthesis, a unity. even a Venus de Milo with her arm off, is still complete, a synthesis. Do you know that's one of the most important qualities we search for in meditation? Inwardly, look for synthesis. Many people say, I don't care how much I suffer in this life, as long as I know that there is a meaning behind it all. Did you hear those words? A meaning behind it all. Now, the material world is concerned only with the outer meaning, the outer obvious fact of what they are dealing with. We're concerned with the meaning behind it all. We're beginning to understand now something that exists amongst us in the form of art. Of course it has its traps, especially to Taurians. Taurus who loves art. They're born art collectors who like their spirituality to have some tangible evidence. Who spend their lives cluttering up their homes and establishments with art collections, whilst their inner space remains unfurnished. Their minds cultivated an artistic appreciation, but unversed in deistic or inward application. Art can be very humbling too, and all these are divine qualities. Anything that can make you feel humble is a divine quality. Sit in any cathedral in Europe and watch the American tourists coming in. Watch their faces when they come into a Rococo-style cathedral. They walk around like this. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. The humility that comes over them. Somewhere where the power of the Yankee dollar has no effect. The way they look up at the vaulted ceilings, go on and up and up. Wonderful. And the rose window, they creep out shocked, awe-inspired, like an Einstein after a mystical experience. They've been walking in new worlds. And you know, that's what we should all be doing, walking in new worlds, because that's what we're going to have to do. We need practice of it. Walking in new worlds. Whereas Socrates said, the world that we approach is along a jeweled way, a jeweled way. The stained glass windows and everything was calculated to simulate, to copy the jeweled way to the kingdom of heaven. In Celia Hanson's book and mine, The Steps of the Master, we've given some exercises. Some exercises which help you to understand the significance of symbols. The unconscious is very like a piece of ice. Very like a piece of ice. When we become disciples, we are presented with symbols. We are presented with symbols. But the Zen master, whoever it is, same in the Orient, same in the Occident, although we expect the master to give us wonderful things, all he gives us to begin with is symbols. And we have to go at them with an ice pick and chip away at them and understand bits of the symbol. And just as we come to the end of breaking all this away and understanding it, vroom, up comes another part of the ice. The unconscious part, the veiled part of the block of ice comes to the surface. Smaller? Yes. So we start all over again with another part of that symbol. And all the time, we're breaking it down and breaking it down. And only when we have cleared away some of the ice flows in our unconscious, will we, as a ship of state, be able to sail calmly, beautifully forward? There is no other way. There are ice flows galore. We call them the dweller on the threshold, hidden, veiled, and we have to clear them before we can sail towards the undiscovered continent. Now, just as a word has an unconscious, as I have shown you, so too many of the events of our ordinary daily life have an unconscious. Just the meeting with somebody by chance in the street, the watching of an animal, perhaps mate with another, all these events of a day have an unconscious part to them. Now, usually, as Jung says, the unconscious part of an event in our daily life does not surface as a thought at all. It has to surface as a symbol. And that means for most of us that we have to wait till we go to sleep before the unconscious part of events that we have experienced during the day can come to us. Why? Because all day long we're rushing around. There's not a moment to spare, not a moment's peace, not a moment of subjectivity, all day long. We're so worn out that we sleep right through the night heavily, unaware of anything. And so the opportunity for the individual to be presented with the unconscious aspect of events is lost. And this builds up and builds up and builds up, and it's responsible for a lot of the mental ill health of our world, our planet. And so, either we must slow the rate of living down so that we can face the hidden elements of the events of our everyday life, confront them, or we've got to find techniques for doing it. And that's why I believe meditation and discipleship is going to be so important in the future, the years ahead. And so the unconscious elements of everything that happens to us during the day comes to us in dreams as symbols. And just having the experience of the symbols helps to relieve the tension, the pressure of the ice flow pushing up. But if we can resolve the symbols, if we can understand what they mean, then the pressure is reduced immediately. It's all part and parcel of overcoming the dweller on the threshold. So we teach in the esoteric the value of symbols, learning what they mean. Brooding, pondering, observing, these are the initial stages of meditation. Never ever grieve that you are not meditating completely and utterly productively. There's so much that you can do in your life leading up to the stage when your meditation will be productive. Brood and ponder. Even learn to sit in silence, and you will be achieving an immense amount in your spiritual unfoldment. How often haven't we looked at the caterpillar, grubbing, eating, ceaselessly, active, absorbing all he can from around him. And just when we think he's going to burst, surely, he stops his activities and begins to spin himself a cocoon, turns inwards, creates an inward realm. We say, well, he's gone to sleep, he's exhausted with his labor. But that's where we make our mistake. The caterpillar is in a state of change. He's changing as he never changed before. And change is into a completely new being, a being able to understand new dimensions. Simple eyes are being converted to compound eyes, capable of seeing other dimensions. Wings are being born in the place of feet. A proboscis for tasting the nectar of the gods. They're all being fashioned inside the cocoon just when we thought that it was all over and he was asleep. That's true of man as well. It's true of every one of us, that if we can learn to brood and ponder, withdraw from the world, lead the meditative way of life, what will alter us? What will cause metamorphosis in us? Change from the caterpillar into the butterfly? Symbols. The stimulating force of symbols. In meditation, the example of the iceberg is the same. In meditation, we are presented with a symbol. In the space between thoughts, we put a symbol. We learn assiduously to quieten the thoughts, to slow them down, to calm everything, and then we get a neutral screen in front of us. And we learn to place a symbol that is pregnant with possible children, pregnant with the possibility of fruiting. And so we learn to choose certain symbols. And in the space between thoughts, those symbols are placed, and then slowly but surely, as we become aware of the symbol, wear its meaning away, up comes the depth aspects of that symbol, the hidden part of the symbol that we knew nothing about. So, we begin to understand how important symbols are. Remember, the brain is a keyboard. I've said it many times, so many times. The brain is a keyboard. When it has to interpret the inner worlds, there's the outer world. We've got enough symbols for that, heaven. 500,000 words in the English language alone. Tons of symbols. But what about the inner world? We have so few symbols to interpret it. And the brain is like the keyboard of a typewriter. And for most of us, we have barely a dozen symbols with which to understand phenomena that are coming into the brain. But if you were given a typewriter with only 5 or 6 keys functioning, and you were told to send somebody a message, a desperate message, you would have to try and function. You would have to try and produce something with a few symbols you've got. And that's what we're like. We get a garbled expression of something that we have experienced within. And so what we need to do is to work on the symbols and eventually have a magnificent keyboard. Taken me 25 years. The only way that we can establish contact with a higher self is to have a panel board. A panel board. And to have something there which the higher self can use and which we can use. A common link, a communication system. In the East, they call this the mandala. It's a mandala. And the disciple has to fill in the pieces of the mandala. And so he builds a mandala assiduously by visualization, which I've described this afternoon. And he puts a piece in the mandala there, and a piece there, and a piece here, and a piece there. And the mandala symbols are acceptable to the soul and acceptable to the personality. And so language of communication is evolved between them. The use of the mandala. We have been told by the Tibetan master that the key for the 20th century for the Anglo-Saxon subrace is the use of psychology, the psychological key. And of course, the man who has made this possible for the world outwardly, en masse, is Carl Jung, whose value The value that he placed on the symbol was immense. And so let us take a particular symbol. Let us take a particular symbol, and here it is. 3 feathers. We have seen something of the background to these feathers. They were the English version of the symbol of the fleur-de-lis of the French court. Let me tell you some of the results of a meditation, a series of meditations that I did on the symbol, so that it can help you to understand what we're talking about. As we have learnt in meditation, we reach the stage of stilling the mind, separating the thoughts so that we have a space, and then placing the symbol of the 3 ostrich feathers in that place. According to my meditation, Browning, whatever it was, where the inner and the outer are blended, where the inner and the outer are blended, where the inner and the outer are blended, the central feather is poised and established. If there is no blending of the inner experience and the outer experience, the middle feather lacks power. There is no blending. It cannot stand erect. The significance of the middle flower is that it is erect, and an erection implies in symbology creativeness. Creativeness through the erection. All these things may seem to you to be devices until you do it yourselves, and you will be flooded with meaning constantly. And there is another meaning here. The 2 feathers on the outside could be compared like the tails of 2 cats. When do their tails go up? For you? When you're about to serve them. Isn't it true? Is it not a valid symbol? Haven't you got this in your lives? Why must we talk about things that belong to the Himalayas when we're talking about our lives? And whilst I can give you a very high and mighty interpretation, let's have something that you're likely to dream about. Yes. And if you have this dream of the 2 cats waiting for you to serve them, it's a symbol. Come on, what about your service? Yes. This is how the higher self must first of all teach you. Teach you the symbols as well as tell you how to get on with them. What to do in the world. Another meaning. Walking down the main street with the left-hand side and the right-hand side. On either side of you. You are erect, and the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the street contains many different qualities. But you have your own consciousness. Then switch it straight away to a nation. The governing power, the erect feather in the middle. But on the left-hand side of the government, there is the leftist movements, communism, socialism. And on the right-hand side of the government, there are the rightist movements. And so this is always so of government, a proud symbol of government, an erect feather with the left wing and the right wing of the government or of society. Let's go to a Doric column. A Doric column, is it not graceful? And of course, in a Doric column, we can only see possibly, as it were, three sides of it with one view. On one side of it, there is the one curl. On the other side, there is the other, and in the middle, the erect one. The Doric column. The Doric column itself has significant meanings. So like a shattered column lay the king, not like that Arthur who with lance and rest from spur to plume a star of tournament shot through the lists at Camelot and charged before the eyes of ladies and of kings. The top of a Doric column. The three feathers are royal flowers. Royal flowers. They are the symbol of spiritual flowers, if you dream of them, waiting for them to be worn on the forehead, on the brow, on the head. The crown with the three feathers waiting to be worn, the spiritual flowers. Another visual image. Le roi, the king, moves down the aisle between his bowing subjects on one side and bowing on the other. This is what we mean when we talk about the language of symbolism. Or let's go commercial. Let's take photography. It's the negative plate, rather it's the negative and the metal plate brought together. And when they are peeled off, there emerges the image. There emerges the image. And so if you have a dream in which you have two feathers bowed outwards and the middle feather is missing, then something is available to you. There is a potential for it. All you need do is to blend the two together and you will get the central feather, the image. This is how the soul communicates with you. Believe me, in the end, no matter what path you take, and I'm pleading for no school, no cause, I'm merely telling you that this is the language that you must ultimately deal with. Then there are symbols that I haven't even unraveled yet. The symbol which I know to be evolution, in which there are divergences on either side in the central stream of evolution. And then the favorite pet, or the dauphin, hoisted above all others. He too is to be served. Then there is, of course, the symbol of Aries, and so on. I shan't spend much time on it, but then, of course, you must go to the individual feather. The individual feather on its own. What can it possibly mean? The individual feather is the symbol of the first ray of will and power. And so if you write down in your spiritual diary, "O Lord, my higher self, I beg of thee, the ray of my soul," and an erect plume is flashed to you, will you know what it means? You will now. The ray of will and power. The ray of will and power. The dot or the monad becomes a stroke. The stroke is a magnetic bar. The symbols of magnetism, the North Pole, the South Pole, and the field. The field becomes a crested deva. A crested deva. And then the deva, as we all did, materializes into the man, or if you like, into the feather, and so on. And so we could talk about monadic level, the level of a Daihan Chohan, the level of the Chohan, the level of the master right down to the man itself. And if we only knew the keys to these symbols, that is what is so enticing about them. If we knew the key, the consecutive run of the feathers and so on, we could trace our way into the kingdom of heaven by meditation. First, the feather, and then the crested entity, and beyond that, as I have described it. Feathers, yes. The feather bent before the wind, hard pressed to remain erect, the individual under the whip. The feather that is broken, the fall of Wolsey, the fall of a personality, the feather that is clipped short, meaning authority diminished, the feather that is plucked out and thrown aside, authority withdrawn, the feather that is split down the center, a dichotomy, the native hue of resolution is divided, the feather that is entangled and meshed with cotton and string, entangled, sicklied o'er with a pale cast of thought. This is the language of communication with the gods. And before I close, I should mention the importance of the symbology of animals. The masters love to give everybody an animal symbol. And I'm not thinking in particular of Little Cricket from, what's the program called? Kung Fu? But this is true. They love to give everybody a symbol. Certainly, some famous theosophist could get no better symbol than a beetle. I said, it's just as well they had the symbol 20 years before the Beatles were born. There is an esotericist in this country, the most clumsy, the most stupid, the most power-crazed idiot I've ever met in my life. His symbol for me, anyway, is a berserk rhinoceros. And a very blind one. And a rhinoceros at the moment which is in a deep swamp up to his knees. In my ashram we discuss the symbols of our dream every morning over breakfast. And everybody has equal status in this respect. And engaged as I am, sometimes for a month on end, 24 hours a day in research on a particular project, as my staff well knows, even I can't get stuff through that I would like to have. I'm engaged on a research project, and when Browning puts you on a research project, you damn well stick to it. And at those times I pay more attention to the dreams of the younger members of the ashram. And those dreams often tell me things as well as it may tell them things. Because then, as my own source is engaged and busy, other sources are given me. So their dream symbols are important. Now my dream symbol is the little elephant. That's the name of my home, for I named it that. The little elephant. Always hard at work. Often trumpeting loudly. And that little elephant came into head-on collision with a rhinoceros not so long ago. And one of the youngsters in my ashram a couple of weeks ago, when I was all cluttered up with research work, told me a dream that he had, a vivid waking dream. And he said, I saw this old elephant, great big chap he was, filled with people inside him, and he was hurtling along. And he was going over obstacles and crashing through puddles of water and breaking his way through forests and goodness knows what. And right next to him, hammering along but puffing and blowing, with this old rhinoceros who just couldn't keep up. Well, the youngster's in the room now. Now, I'm not going to embarrass him by asking him if it wasn't true, but there you are. And so they do tell us in ways possible. I have a secretary. She wouldn't mind if I told her because we kid her openly. She had a bit of a deprived life, and she's always hiding things away in case she runs out of them. And if we run short of something, we go to her to ask her for something. We say, have you any acetate for the covers of the books? Yes, but I'm keeping it. Well, what are you keeping it for? Well, in case we run short. What I don't like about it is that she hides things for me. Little tidbits and things that I need. And you know what her symbol is? Well, I don't know whether you know the animal over here, but it's what we call a weasel. And weasels, or ferrets, or whatever you like to call them, are animals that take anything from you and go and store them. They don't use them. They go and store them and hide them away until they rot rather than use them. And the embarrassing thing is that every now and again she has this weasel dream. And things that we've lost in the ashram for months suddenly surface. Out of hidden corners come typewriter ribbons and erasers and all sorts of things. And then as she forgets the dream, the same old process happens. And she knows it's her, and she confesses it is her, and she can't help it. Well, that's how the masters talk to us and laugh up their sleeves sometimes. And then we have a youngster in the ashram who is very, very clumsy. He does things in fits and starts as a first-rate astral body. And his symbol is twofold, which is very like the first-rate astral body. One moment they're calm, and next moment they're in a volcano. And the one symbol, the calm symbol, is the symbol of a crane. He's very tall and walks just like a crane. And the other symbol, which represents the moments when he is in a Ray 1 astral tizzy, is a great big cart horse. He came into me one day. He was staying at the house at Fort Worth, lent to me by the Reynolds. Came in very embarrassed one day and said, "Hey, boss, what's the symbol mean of a cart horse?" I said, "Well, tell me what the dream was." And he was very embarrassed and didn't want to tell me. Eventually, I got it out of him. And the dream was that a great big cart horse came cluttering into the courtyard next to the house, knocking everything over all over the place, and dropped a huge load of horse dung and then cluttered out again. And this particular lad, and the dream exactly symbolized the state of affairs, because the complaint from the Reynolds was that the courtyard was cluttered up with a lot of his nonsense, cases, books, odds and ends, motor car, and so on. And he is just like that. And of course it's very useful in the ashram, because whenever he acts in a clumsy sort of way, you get from the rest of the ashram. And then there's another member of the ashram, a little younger, who is a peacock, always preening his feathers. Got a hairdryer, which is a symbol of decadence if ever there was one. And of course the peacock is the symbol of the seventh ray. And he's a very precise boy, and he's immaculate in everything he does, and everything must be exactly in the right position. And he's always preening himself and has 2, sometimes 3 showers a day. And then there's the swan. And the swan is the most occult symbol of all. I know of no symbol in all esoteric symbology with more meaning than the swan. Socrates had a dream vision of the swan the night before his favorite pupil, Plato, came to him. This is one of my problems, you know. When you begin to work under a master, he's inclined to crowd you a little bit. And being a lord of the fifth ray, everything must be categorized and right, exact. And so I have a system whereby I have a scientific cap that I put on, figuratively speaking, and then I've got my scientific mind on. And then I can put that aside and put my astrological mind on. And then my artistic one. And all the rays have got a cap for me. And it's true, absolutely true. You know, it can be tremendously easy and important to you to use symbols in an effective way. I'm sometimes under the whip on tour. Things go wrong. I've got schedules to meet. Promises aren't kept. Youngsters break down, ill, flu, so on and so on. And when things get really desperate and the tour schedule is threatened, I start to use symbols. And everybody knows when Bossy gets his shoes out, because I always wear slippers, when I get my great big clodhoppers out with 1.5 inch heels on them and put them on, I change gear completely. I begin to run the tour as a military campaign. And you know, it works. It works. You just change gear. And it can be done so easy symbolically. Self-hypnosis, call it what you like. But the use of symbols are very, very important. The swan, the most occult symbol of all, has such esoteric meaning that I dare not even give it to you. But I have given you indications of it with regard to Socrates and Plato. All birds are symbolic of spiritual powers. The birds vary, of course. There are chicks that need nurturing, but have spiritual wings waiting to grow. When you ask advice, opinions about somebody in your spiritual diary, if you get back feedback in terms of birds, you'll know that that person or those that you're wanting to work with are worthwhile. But when the birds appear to you, they appear in different shapes and forms, and I've given you some of them. Birds are very, very important. Look for the mundane in your symbols. Don't think that the symbols, because they are at your level, have to be elegant and flowing, all of them, like the ostrich feathers. A man sitting on a motorbike facing the other way is a very good symbol of a person who really is on the path. The motorbike's on the freeway, he's on the path, but he's faced the other way. His previous lives, everything he is doing really tantamounts to his being on the path, but he is still not facing the right way yet. Important symbols. And of course, the future for many of you is going to be group leadership. And when you become a group leader, you are expected, you are the pater familias. You are the father of the family, the father of the group, and you're expected to give advice. And so you're not just looking for meanings for yourself, you're looking for meanings for your flock. And you are constantly fed with them. And there's an awful lot of work to do. And so think very carefully of what I was saying tonight. It represents a stage of meditation, of placing the symbol pregnant with meaning. The most convincing and wonderful symbol I ever had was probably one of the first, because it was direct from the Master. And that was the symbol of a gramophone, an old type gramophone. Do you remember them? I suppose we've still got drawings of them. The old type gramophone had one of these great speakers on it. Do you remember them? The old gramophone, yes. And if I remember rightly, that was the symbol of his master's voice. His master's voice. And as I stared at this gramophone that was playing glorious music, the music worked up to a crescendo and got faster and faster, and I began to stare fascinatedly at the record, at the disc, where the needle was racing and racing and racing and racing across the disc, and eventually reached the central point. The Master was teaching me how to focus, giving me a symbol and teaching me how to focus. If you are a person that is not receptive to the sort of symbol language that I was describing here tonight, and feel that it must be so, shall we say, Roman Catholic, you'll be disappointed. The symbols of Catholicism were glorious. They were appropriate for the seventh ray merging with the sixth, the rays of the Roman Catholic Church. They were responsible for the Renaissance, most wonderful artistic period, a heritage that we all have still to this day. But for this age, and for this sub-race, look for the mundane, look for the things that are about you, and learn to recognize what they mean inwardly. Symbols do not operate like words. I've given you a series of meanings here, all represented by one symbol. And so I should close by saying that the purpose of my going into all these aspects of the symbol is to say that in the end, for the individual, it is the horoscope that gives the soul's purpose. And if one of the aspects of the horoscope is Aries, then we know that somehow or the other, the symbol of the first ray, the feather, is related to Aries and to all the symbols of Aries. And as I have said several times, and we'll do that in esoteric astrology, the disciple of the future, person working with esoteric astrology, is not going to get his horoscope interpreted for him in ordinary mundane language, because it really isn't enough. What we are going to be given ultimately, and this is what I am busily working on, and Browning thinks it's one of the most important things I can do in my life, is to provide a series of symbols on which the individual will meditate, taking each symbol or groups of symbols and putting them in the space between thoughts in his own mind, and putting them there 1 year, 5 years later, 10 years, 20 years later, and drawing on his own archetypal pattern, and at the same time learning how to use symbols for other purposes. Thank you very much.